Hey, welcome back to Rabbit Holes with Aaron. We're trying a different thing. We're doing a series called Confession of Narcissist. And with me today I have James West. He's a licensed professional counselor I actually went to school with, and we walk some of the same grounds and everything else. And so, yeah, introduce yourself, James. Let's get started.
I'm James West. I own a counseling business called Love Stories Counseling, and also another business called Dallas Grief Counseling. And primarily, I work with couples and individuals around sex therapy.
Okay.
So we're talking about
Awesome.
narcissism.
Yeah, we're talking about narcissism. Exactly. Um, yeah, I had a different thought the other day, and I wanted to run it by you and run it by everybody. I thought I saw a pattern in my own life, which is why it's confessions of a narcissist. Patterns in my own life where I turned from a victim of a narcissist into a narcissist, and then back into the victim of another narcissist.
Okay.
And I was wondering, what do you think of that?
Well, I think that no matter what kind of trauma you have, there's like the triangle. I can't remember what it's called, but there's like the perpetrator, the victim, and the bystander.
Okay.
And we we are so beautiful human beings. We are pattern seeking creatures. Part of that pattern seeking is that we recreate the circumstances of the wounds that we've experienced in an effort.
Mm,
And I believe it's not just because we are gluttons for punishment, but or some kind of sadists or something or masochists, but that we
yeah.
are attempting to heal from those wounds. Like Esther Perel, she's kind of a rock star in the couples counseling psychology world. And she always has this line that she'll use a lot. She has a podcast called Where Should We Begin, where she does like couples counseling on the air. It's pretty cool. And she'll say, like, did you know that you were cast in a role for a play that you didn't even know you were trying out for in this marriage? That like your your partner has put you in this role, and similarly, like you've put your partner in a
Right.
corresponding role. So I think that you're asking, how did this happen? That I was the victim and then the perpetrator and then the victim again. Like we recreate the trauma, and in the cycle of recreating, it's called trauma reenactment. We will find ourselves in the various positions of either the perpetrator, the victim, or the bystander.
Wow. Man, that's deep. It reminds me, but good. I can see how it works. And it reminds me of like, in counseling practice, the person keeps saying the same thing over and over again, right? And you listen and you observe and you try and make sense of it, and then you notice it. You're like, hey, I've noticed you said that 3 times in a row. It could be something as innocuous as, I'm happy. Oh, and you're like, well, I hear you keep saying that. And what I learned from that, life hacks of counseling, I guess, is that the person's stuck in that somehow, in that part of the pattern, and maybe verbally stuck on that particular thing they're saying. And until somebody can listen and help them finish that thought, then they can't move forward to the next thing. Does that make sense? You're familiar with this, I know, but
But yeah, just yesterday I had a client tell me at least 7 or 8 times, I'm just having a hard time being enthusiastic about much of anything right now.
mm,
I kind of teased him about it a couple times. I understand that you were having a hard time feeling enthusiastic about much of anything, right? Like, and then I
yeah,
reminded him at the end, like, you said that 7 times to me at the beginning, so it makes sense that you're struggling, so yeah, definitely people do that.
yeah. Well, and if he says it 7 times, I would think that's the thing he's enthusiastic about, is saying that. May perhaps.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. He's enthusiastically unenthusiastic.
Yeah. Yeah, so that does make sense, taking it back to my idea.
Hmm.
And it's funny, I can actually see the end of the tunnel of that, right? So I'm Yeah, so I throw another person in there. So I'm the victim, as I call it, the observer, and the perpetrator over and
Yeah.
over and over again, and all at once sometimes in different roles. And I keep moving through those roles until finally, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to summarize it. You probably have a good word for it. But finally, I'm like, okay, I'm done with all this nonsense. What do I got to do to get out of that pattern? And
Yeah.
soul searching and forgiveness work and resentment and all this stuff, and realizing, coming full circle with, knowledge about my parents and the good they were doing and everything else. It seems like it culminates into, this is different. I don't know how to act. I think I'll just sit here and listen, and it's a completely different feeling to be in, but yeah,
Yeah, you
interesting.
recognized a cycle repeating itself, and you got sick of it.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that might be, and I'm way ahead of this series. Maybe it's going to be one episode. I don't know. If we solve all the problems in 30 minutes, I
What?
mean,
We haven't even started. What's going on? What are you talking about?
but I was thinking like, and I looked at myself and I saw over the course of my life, I'm 51 now, so I got, half a century under my belt. And it's like, as I look back at these cycles of repeating through divorces and remarriages and, having kids and all this other stuff, and I guess I was wondering like, okay, so last time I was in a toxic relationship, I was kind of the victim and the other person was kind of the narcissist. And I was like, although I was passive aggressive as the victim, although I had narcissistic tendencies, and the victim is like the socially acceptable narcissist, perhaps. I don't know. I'm way off the reservation here, but yeah. So I got to this point. I'm like, why didn't I turn into a narcissist again, Aaron? As I was having a quiet conversation with myself while walking in nature, so there's a lot of good things happening there, but I was like, why didn't it happen again? And I was like, well, I don't know. I think it's because I forgave all the narcissists that I've ever encountered. And I forgave myself, maybe the biggest narcissist of all. And so the forgiveness seemed to be, for me at least, the key that like turned the tumblers. And all of a sudden I'm walking into a wide world of moments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like once you're able to forgive yourself, then you're saying that's when you were able to kind of start that recovery process to stop being as narcissistic.
That's it. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. But I guess, I mean, ultimately, and I'm once again just, I hadn't even thought this thought before, but the narcissist and the victim, they just need to hurt themselves enough. It almost seems like, right? The narcissist is not having a good time. We think they're over there laughing and smiling and they're feeling a sense of peace because they're draining our batteries. Because I've been on both sides, so I'm going to keep using we. But so as they're draining our batteries, we're like, well, they've got it good and we've got it bad. And a narcissist would probably disagree with that, but it's all misery and
Uh-huh.
it's all pain,
Yeah.
and it's all, you might as well just stab yourself with a pin all day long. I mean, or hit your head on the wall. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, you had something.
Well, I was curious what you mean. Like, how do you define narcissists? Like,
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point because I was talking to somebody, another friend, about narcissism as I was thinking this stuff out. And he said, "Oh, yeah, no, I disagree because I'm a narcissist." And I was like, I know you pretty well. We're friends, so that's pretty much, a good litmus test. And he was like, "Oh, no, I thought you meant pessimist. I'm a pessimist." And I was like, "Yeah, that's a big difference." Yeah, okay, good. We can agree now. But you're
uh-huh.
right, it's important to know. Narcissism. What is it? It's the one that gets all the attention. But, some things, narcissist is based on Narcissus, I think, who looked at in Greek mythology, looked at his reflection in the lake, and he loved himself so much that that's where he died. Loved looking at himself or something similar to that. So he didn't eat, he didn't drink, he just kept staring at himself. And, he's laying by a lake somewhere,
He
his
neglected
sculptures
his
anyway.
neglected his well-being in favor of just staring at an image of himself, not even himself.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay,
Important
so what does that
points.
mean for you? Does that mean you're sitting there
Yeah,
staring
no,
at a
no, no.
lake?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so what that means for me is, they're, well, we know them to be self-absorbed, maybe arrogant, a lot of other choice words to cover that kind of person. You're leaving a leaving a wake of broken bodies behind them as they move forward in life. Perhaps, I mean, these people can be CEOs. These people can be your manager. They can be sometimes your child. So it's these people that are so focused on themselves that and actually they put themselves at a higher tier than everybody else. Whereas a victim puts everybody else on the higher tier and themselves on the lower level. And the narcissist put themselves on a higher level, on the pedestal, and everybody else on a lower level, so they can mistreat anybody because they're lesser life forms in a way. So, yeah, so that kind of defines it, I guess, in some terms. What other questions do you have?
Yeah, so it makes me think about like when I had a client that this is early on in my career. I had a client that my supervisor identified as narcissistic in my caseload, and because I was missing it, he was like, they kind of sound narcissistic, and asked me to describe them a little bit more. One of the main features that sticks with me now from that experience was that they really wanted their relationship to work. They had come to couples therapy, but then they weren't really able to take responsibility very well. Like the reason they
Right.
were in couples. Go ahead.
Well, I was just agreeing with you.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like it was like this thing where they could not tolerate the idea that they'd messed up. It was hard for them to say, I can see how what I did upset you and I feel bad about that and I'm going to work on not doing that again. That accountability was just really challenging for them,
Right.
to the point where they ended up just not really being able to. Even when I sat them down and said, "This is what you need to say," I gave him the script,
Right.
and he
Word
couldn't.
for word.
He still couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I've had a number of
Okay.
clients like that in my career who they come in with their partner and they're like, "All I need is this, sense of accountability that you understand what you did and how it hurt me, and that you feel remorseful about it, and that you're going to try not to do it anymore." They end up spending all this time instead talking about how they didn't mean to hurt the other person, and that the other
Hmm.
person is very sensitive, or they'll just sort of like change the subject almost. It's very disorienting.
Okay. Yeah, that's been my experience as well. You're like, you got me as a victim. I have solid proof. Here it is. I've been taking notes. It's a ledger with times and dates that you did this. Take a look at it. And they look at it and they're like, man, you got a list of me? You must not love me very much.
Yeah, they
Or
would
something like
crumble.
that. And the person with the list is like, oh, well, yeah, but look right, right here, and it's like, well, I mean, if you weren't so organized, we wouldn't need to be here at counseling, or whatever. And the person is spinning, and the counselor, I can only imagine what that would do, So yeah, it's kind of this like ninja responsibility ninja. I'm gonna give it a new name, like
Yeah.
just dodge, like.
Yeah, it
And
is like,
and somehow you got a sword and you got them pinned down and you blink or something, and the sword you got it aimed at yourself, and they're smiling over there. And I read a book
hmm
just to get more ideas about narcissists. I went to the library yesterday and I got this book. I don't recall the name of it, but it called Narcissists and a whole group of psychopathic people, vampires. And I was like,
yeah, energy
man,
vampires like Colin
vampire.
Robinson.
Yeah, energy vampires. And I was like, okay, well, let's follow that rabbit hole down. Okay, vampires don't like to be out in the sun. Okay, yeah, they're kind of stealthy and secret. Okay, they're sneaky.
Uh-huh.
They get people mesmerized to do their bidding. I'm like, oh yeah, that's one of them, you know. And so as I went down the list of vampire, and so I came to the conclusion that like that seems to fit. What do you think?
No, I like it. I think monsters, the reason why we have these concepts of monsters is to describe humans that we may encounter.
Yeah, it's like Scooby Dooby Doo, right? You get over there, and the monster's always a human.
Pull them in person. I think that there is something. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think more about that the vampiricism of the narcissist.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think well, vampires are vain too.
yeah,
They think they're better than everyone else because they live forever. You know, they're immortal, and so they kind of have this ego going on.
yeah.
What else do vampires have?
Oh my gosh,
Shape shifting.
they
They can
drain.
shape shift,
Yeah.
so they're always
Well, it was
contorting their appearance, like becoming a
yeah.
mist. Like you can never pin them down. Even if you kill a
You can't.
vampire, you have to kill it in a particular way with a stake to the heart, right? So if you cut off its head, I don't think it works unless you're like Blade or something.
Yeah, and they drain the people of blood, right? They go around and
hmm
they empty humans out to where they're dead afterwards.
But they take their
And
life force. Yeah, they like suck up their life
exactly.
force. They can't look in
And
the
yeah,
mirror. Vampires don't have reflections. Isn't that interesting?
yeah.
Actually,
Well,
so
yeah.
there's a lot of really interesting stuff about narcissism on this podcast that I like. It's called We Can Do Hard Things with Glennon
Okay.
Doyle. She talks a lot about she like basically interviews famous psychologists and experts and stuff with her wife and her sister, I think. And they talk a lot about how like there's a kind of a difference between clinical narcissism, which we think of as narcissistic personality disorder, and the more colloquial like narcissism, which is more this like kind of self-centeredness, or maybe it could also be described as emotionally immature. And so they spend a lot of time talking about like emotionally immature people. But colloquially, I think we can talk about narcissism. We kind of understand what it means, but this one feature that they talked about that distinguishes like an emotionally mature person from a narcissist, like a clinical narcissist, was that a clinical narcissist has this, they lack a sense of identity. They're very insecure, right? And
Mm,
that's
yeah.
why they're so like uppity, like I'm better than you, or because they're always trying to build themselves up in their own mind and in other people's minds as worthy, in spite of the fact that they feel completely unworthy deep down inside. It's very difficult for them to acknowledge that they actually feel that way. It's more of an unconscious thing, but you can
Right.
see it in how they live vicariously through other people in their lives. That like they project their image onto other people. Like they themselves don't really have a reflection, and they find
Yeah.
themselves kind of trying to create a reflection in somebody else, like in a child that they raised, or a mentee, or something like that, where someone they have power over. And that what really pisses off these kinds of people is when the person that they're trying to mold starts saying no. So it's really hard when they have like kids, like when they're like 2 or 3 years
Yeah.
old, they start saying no. That can be really challenging for narcissistic people, because it's like, no, you're not supposed to have your own identity. You're supposed to have an identity that I chose for you. So I think
Right.
that's sort of like, it kind of adds to the complexity of the original myth of narcissist staring into his own image. Like maybe like he's just staring into an image of himself. It's not actually him. And so like that's why I think it's
Right.
a interesting, curious thing to bring out a
Yeah.
little bit. So did you have
Yeah.
that
And then dark.
experience? Like someone was doing that to you, like making you into they're trying to mold you into something that you didn't feel like you were.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I've had a relationship with a person who definitely has exhibited a lot of signs that we're talking about, and I was exhibiting the signs of being molded or controlled.
hmm
I mean, molded is maybe falls under control, or control falls under molded, but Pretty much I was controlled and I was waiting for a text like all day long, every day. If I got a text from that person, that was emergency priority number one. And
Mhm.
that was by me because I wanted to prove to them how faithful and how good of a person I was. And I wanted them to see it. And and no matter how hard I did, they saw just a little bit of it, I think, but they didn't see as much as I was laying down there. So as far as what I was giving up, what I would give up in a second, right, to go and be with them. So, my free time was waiting, pining, checking the phone. Oh, I got a text from her, whatever. So I would say that I was controlled. And, my eating, drinking, sleeping, whatever was dependent upon that person,
Yeah. Okay.
and their interaction or waiting for them. And they did what they did to get me that way. Yeah. So yeah, I've definitely seen that and been a part of that. So that's what I'm saying. And even when you're a victim, I'm recognizing I had narcissistic tendencies because there was more of this passive aggressive, you know, joking about what I wanted or being trying to push a button and waiting to see if it affects the person to get them to where I wanted them to be. So both people are trying to control, actually. The victim's trying to get the narcissist to change, and the narcissist trying to get the victim to be like them.
Well, let's talk about this victim. So, in the original story, the victim is Echo. She's a nymph,
Okay, yeah.
and she can't talk. Echo. She can only say the things that she can only repeat back what other people have said to her, right?
Okay.
So it's sort of like this cursed life. But I've always identified with Echo in the narcissist story. She's this kind of she just reflects back what you want to hear. She has a hard time. She like speaking her own voice.
Uh, yeah.
She's kind of like a chameleon kind of character. She's like, it feels a little people pleasy, right? I imagine Echo, kind of as Narcissus stares into the reflection in the water, Echo is down under the water, like underneath his reflection. Like
Hmm.
she's the one who's getting the image projected onto her in that story. And she
Well,
finds
whatever
for him.
he says and whatever he says to love himself. Oh, you're so handsome.
Yeah,
Well, I never noticed. She has to say it back to him, so he's hearing. Yeah,
yeah. And he never even seems to notice her.
yeah. That is, man, that is a cursed existence, but it is reflective is a good word for this. It's reflective of how it actually works in real life, at least as I've lived it. And
Yeah.
isn't that so true of my parents' generation that they wanted us to be a reflection of them?
Hmm.
I mean, it's like generational, the whole generation of narcissists. No, I don't know if that's true or not. But that's the way parenting was
Uh-huh.
in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It's just assumed if I as a dad was good at football, then you're good at football too because you got my genes. And that's just the way it works. And it's like they
Hmm.
wanted, and the child tries so hard to be the reflection until it doesn't fit anymore. And then they go do their own thing. Teenage years are wonderful like that.
Well,
Yeah.
what's curious is that this was a phenomenon that a number of counseling professionals and psychologists were noticing, that there were these people who they exhibited the signs of adult children of alcoholics. Are you familiar with that concept? Just like, your parent, one of your parents, or both of them
Yeah.
were alcoholics. And so when you grow up, you're sort of this parentified child, or you have low sense of self-worth because you were sort of neglected a lot as a kid growing up. And there was this whole class of people that were coming to therapy who it was as if they were adult children of alcoholics, but there was no alcoholism or addiction in
Right.
their
Right.
families. And so they were asked, what's going on here? And what they discovered was narcissism. And so they wrote this book where there's, I mean, some of them wrote this book. It's called The Narcissistic Family, where they talk
Yeah.
about like how does this phenomenon show up, where does it come from, and then how do you practice recovery from that. So like,
Yeah.
how to have better boundaries, how to communicate your feelings, how to sort of reclaim your own identity and stop being an echo pretty much, and learn how to be
Yeah.
your own person.
Well, I wonder if there's some kind of connection, and I know we got to wrap it up, but connection where the echo becomes Narcissus or whatever. So it's like he's
Yeah,
got to move, and Narcissus is like the last stage or something like that. I mean, it could be a 10-step thing or whatever, but you move through these cycles.
it's like a dance.
Yeah. Ooh, I like
I
that.
don't know if one's necessarily the end stage. I would just say that they kind of, that cycles repeat.
Yeah.
And I feel like
Wow.
so much of what we're trying to figure out now as a culture is how do we stop repeating these cycles? Like, we see the cycles, we understand that the cycles are there. And I can tell you in my own life, I've never felt so desperate and depressed as when I recognized a cycle and then I continued to find myself getting caught in that cycle, despite my
Yeah.
ability to identify the cycle, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's like you
a lot
can
of work.
see the edge of the gear moving and you see movement, but you don't know why you're moving that way, you know?
So I guess, yeah, like, this concludes our part one. I want to hear more about your confessions. Today we heard about your, your echo experience, I think, for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next
It'll
time
be
we're going to hear
interesting.
about the projection.
I'll have to change the name of the show from Rabbit Holes with Aaron to Rabbit Holes in Aaron. Just like going down, 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 deeper, 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 deeper than you want to. Like,
It's
hey,
Aaron's
wait a
all the way
minute.
down.
I didn't want to explore Aaron's rabbit holes. But anyway, okay. Thanks, James.
Yeah, you're
Bye.
welcome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.